watch the building collapse.
I thought we had agreed to never mention Marvin Bush.
Welcome to Better Bad News.
Hey, I thought you said it was forbidden to mention the name Marvin Bush. Marvin Bush. Marvin Bush. Marvin Bush.
But why would they not want Marvin Bush to be mentioned? Well, do a Google search and find out, for heaven's sake.
The official story is crumbling. That's clear.
Is the official story crumbling?
The government's conspiracy theory was tested by scholars and engineers who tested the government's claim.
The co-chairman of Scholars for 9/11 Truth, Professor Emeritus at the University of Minnesota at Duluth, James Fetzer. Professor, thank you so much for being with us. What evidence do you have that the government was involved, that Cheney knew, that anybody in the chain of command knew ahead of time that this was going to happen on 9/11?
We've discovered that the Twin Towers were brought down by controlled demolition. We've discovered that Osama bin Laden appears to have had nothing to do with it. Do you know, Ollie, that the FBI has confirmed that they have no hard evidence relating Osama bin Laden to the events of 9/11? Are you aware of that?
Well, Osama bin Laden himself claims that. I mean, they didn't manufacture those tapes.
This is the FBI, Ollie. This is the FBI that has affirmed in the last couple of weeks they have no hard evidence tying Osama bin Laden to 9/11.
And so all of these people that died on 9/11 were, as you're articulating, died as a consequence of what our government did.
We've discovered that practically everything the government has told us about it is false.
I want to get, and so all of these people that died on 9/11 were, as you're articulating, died as a, and so all of them were part of this consequence of what our government. Let me ask, how big is this group of professors?
Over 300 members, Colonel North, including about 200 with advanced research skills, and about 85 that have affiliations, including physicists, mechanical engineers, pilots, aeronautical engineers. We're trying to find out exactly what happened. Our government has a considerable reputation for telling things that are not true.
No wonder Amy Goodman hasn't reported on what the scholars for 9/11 Truth have discovered. It's so devastating. I don't want to tell anybody.
The chain of command knew ahead of time that this was going to happen on 9/11.
It's a dangerous world out there.
That Cheney knew that...
Hey, hold on. Hey, hold on.
So it's been tested.
Hold on.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it a required course?
Those damned Scholars for Truth.
The hypothesis was impossible.
So the story is crumbling.
It has crumbled.
So then what do we do?
This is an orange. If you were told it was something else, you wouldn't believe it, would you? This is called visual identification based on experience. This building is about to be destroyed in what is called a controlled demolition. Buildings do not do this spontaneously. Here is another example of a controlled demolition. The initial charges are spaced about 1 second apart. And you can see that each section begins falling separately. Successful demolitions require that all structural support columns collapse at virtually the same time. If they don't, or if something else goes wrong, the result will look something like this. This is World Trade Center 7 just before it collapsed on September the 11th, 2001. It had not been hit by an aircraft. It had been damaged by falling debris and fire. But by 5:20 p.m., most of the fires have been extinguished. Although the building was 47 stories high, it doesn't fall sideways, nor collapse unevenly. For this to have happened, all of the building's vertical supports must have given way at almost exactly the same time. Yet the Federal Emergency Management Agency reported that the collapse was due primarily to fire. But what does it look like to you? As at July 2007, there is no final report on the collapse of World Trade Center 7. But the National Institute of Standards and Technology still rules out a controlled demolition. So the question is, Do you believe what you can see with your own eyes? Or do you believe what you are told?
They made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
On fire, some small fires in the woods, just small brush fires. The ground smoking, debris everywhere, pieces of metal, paper, insulation, wiring. And I just looked around and no people, and I'm thinking, where are the people?
Wrath, especially in the Muslim world, the question remains, if America is this vulnerable, is anyone safe? Geeta Gurumurthy, BBC News.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. There's almost a sense downtown in New York behind me, down by the World Trade Centers, of just an area completely closed off as the rescue workers try to do their job. But this isn't the first building that has suffered as a result. We know that part of the Marriott Hotel next to the World Trade Center also collapsed as a result of this huge amount of falling debris from 110 floors of the two twin towers of the World Trade Center. As you can see behind me, the Trade Center appears to be still burning. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that behind that there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar New York skyline, a symbol of the financial prosperity of this city, but completely disappeared now. And
I think we need to first take a look at what happened on September 11th. There were actually 3 buildings that collapsed on September 11th. World Trade Center 7 was 2 blocks away from the Twin Towers. I think this is important to consider because it was not rained on by any debris. It was just a 40-story building. And at 5 p.m. on 9/11, Jane Stanley, the reporter for the BBC, was standing right in front, and was standing at ground zero and reported that Building 7 had collapsed, when in fact, you could still see it over her shoulder. And then 20 minutes later, it did collapse. This is foreknowledge, and it needs to be investigated. Additionally, Larry Silverstein, the owner of World Trade Center 7 complex, before 9/11 had taken out a multi-billion-dollar insurance policy to protect his property against a terrorist attack. And then in 2002, on a PBS station interview, he said that he gave the order to pull it. Pull it is a controlled demolition term. But more evidence of foreknowledge. These are facts. You can watch the interview. You can look. You can get the BBC footage. How did the British know 20 minutes ahead of time that this was going to happen? This needs to be investigated. There is a preponderance of anomalies surrounding the events on 9/11. Architects and engineers, over 1,000 degreed and licensed architects and engineers have looked at the information, and there's so much information that needs to be, that doesn't make sense with the official story. The only way for the official story to make sense is if the laws of physics had changed.
that decision to pull. And they made that decision to pull. And then we watched the building collapse.
Say something, lightweight, step it aside when we come in. Feel it in your chest, the syllables get pumping. People on the street can panic and start running. Words on loose leaf sheet, complete coming. I jump on my mind, I summon the rhyme, I'm dumping. Healing the blind, I promise to let the sun in. Sick of the dark ways, we march to the drumming. Jump when they tell us that they wanna see jumping. Fuck that, I wanna see some fist pumping. Risk something, take back what's yours. Say something that you know they might attack you for. Cause I'm sick of being treated like I have before. Like a stupid standing for what I'm standing for. Like this war's really just a different brand of war. Like it doesn't cater to rich and abandoned poor. Like they understand you in the back of the jet when you can't put gas in your tank. These fuckers are laughing away to the bank and cashing a check, asking you to have compassion and have some respect for a leader so nervous in an obvious way, stuttering and mumbling for nightly news to replay, and the rest of the world watching at the end of the day in their living room laughing like, what did he say?
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Team, and Mike A.S.A.P, those responsible for these cowardly acts.
But I am not laughing, cause when it gets tense I know what might happen. World is cold, the bold men bulletproof vests away. It's ironic, at times like this you pray, but a bomb blew the mosque up yesterday. There's bombs on the buses, bikes, roads, inside your market, your shops, your clothes. My dad, he's got a lot of fear, I know, but enough pride inside not to let that show. My brother had a book he would hold with pride, a little red cover with a broken spine on the back. He hand wrote a quote inside, when the rich wage war, it's the poor who die. Meanwhile, the leader just talks away, stuttering and mumbling for nightly news to replay. The rest of the world watching at the end of the day, both scared and angry like, what did he say?
I want to thank you all for giving me a chance to speak to you. I know that the conditions are really tough. I fully understand that you're in a risky environment. Many of you are very skilled analysts, and it's very important for the world to know the truth. And you're truth finders. You're the folks we're counting on to explain to not only our fellow citizens but the entire world the truth about my national security team, the truth about its evil nature, the truth about its weapons programs, the truth about its evil intentions, and me, the true nature of evil. And coming from Texas, I know the definition are really hot.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Which leads me to conclude that if, in fact, compromise is not coming, that the traditional way of America gets to war is what would be best for U.S. interests. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall we had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. one can combine other means of pressure with sanctions. I mentioned that explosion on August 17th. We could step up the pressure. I mean, look, people, Iranian submarines periodically go down. Someday one of them might not come up. Who would know why? We can do a variety of things if we wish to increase the pressure. I'm not advocating that. But I'm just suggesting that this is not a either-or proposition. It's just sanctions has to succeed or other things. We are in the game of using covert means against the Iranians. We could get nastier at that.
Great city, we saw tragedy arrive on a quiet morning. September the 11th. September the 11th. September the 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th.
September 11th. September 11th.
September 11th. September 11th.
September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. 2001. Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein.
Saddam Hussein.
Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein. Saddam. 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 Saddam.
Saddam Hussein.
War and danger. Continuing danger. Hour of danger. Very, very dangerous world. A grave new threat. Horrific acts of atrocities. Murderous regimes dedicating to killing us. Tyranny and terror. Slaughtered thousands. Weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction. Weapons programs.
The deadliest of weapons.
Terrible weapons. Nuclear weapons.
Nuclear weapons.
Poison gas. Torture chambers. Mass graves.
Deadly technologies.
Radical ideology of hate.
Terror of threats.
Terror.
Terror.
Terror. War on terrorism. War against terrorism.
Global war on terror.
Global terrorism. 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 The evil terrorists. 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 Terrorists.
Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists.
Terrorists.
Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists.